undeniable risk when you look at the animal feeding studies, and if you see what has happened to these animals that have been fed GMOs, potentially precancerous cell growth, smaller brains, livers, and testicles, partial atrophy of the liver, damaged immune system, multiple massive tumors, early death, organ damage, smaller babies, fewer babies, 5 times the rate of infant mortality, hair growing in the mouths, birth defects, etc. When I speak to pediatricians like Dr. Michelle Perro, she's seeing in recent years an increase of tremendous digestive disorders that are very complicated, failure to thrive, allergic to every food group, and all sorts of cognitive disorders. She's convinced that GMOs are part of that puzzle that explain it. In fact, many, many mothers have said that when they take their children off of GMOs, they get better both behaviorally and in their health. Did an evaluation of the animal feeding studies on GMOs in 2009 and said there's so much evidence of damage to the rats and mice that were fed GMOs, gastrointestinal problems, immune system problems, organ damage, reproductive disorders, accelerated aging, etc., that every doctor should prescribe non-GMO diets to every patient and the government should impose a moratorium. But I hear over and over again the same disorders and diseases that the lab animals were afflicted from getting better in humans that are taking GMOs out of their diet, and sometimes within 2 or 3 days. And then if you look at the 2 main toxins associated with GMOs, the Bt toxin produced in corn and cotton, which is now found to poke holes in human cells. It gets through somehow into the blood supply, because a Canadian published study shows it's in the blood of 80% of the unborn fetuses of pregnant women, and in 93% of the pregnant women themselves. The Bt toxin characteristics of possibly creating permeable gut and being an allergen, the characteristics of Roundup, which is sprayed on most of the genetically engineered crops, how it chelates, it's linked to cancer, it's an endocrine disruptor, it chelates nutrients, making them unavailable. If you look at the characteristics of these 2 toxins, they would predispose individuals to the same disorders that are afflicting lab animals, that doctors say are getting better in their patients, that veterinarians are saying are getting better in their livestock, and that are on the rise in the U.S. population since GMOs were introduced. In short, in other words, eating papaya that's genetically engineered might cause you to get more colds, more susceptibility to hepatitis or HIV. And again, these are completely backed with peer-reviewed published studies, but we can only say might. The reason why we can only say might, there hasn't been any animal feeding studies on the papaya, certainly no human feeding studies. We've heard only anecdotal evidence of people getting sick in relationship to eating papaya every day. I would discount that until a wider study is done, but it's an example of a technology where when it was introduced, they had the assumption that the protein was safe, they had the assumption that the RNA was safe, and now we know through the most cutting-edge science that we can't make that assumption, and we've actually put the population at risk. And when I spoke to a virologist, Dr. Jonathan Latham, he said that the approval of this completely overlooked a huge bank of peer-reviewed published studies. It never evaluated to see if the protein that was added to the papaya that had never before been in a Hawaiian papaya or any papaya, if it might be something that would suppress our immune system against viral infections or possibly interfere with things like the cell cycle, which might lead to cancer.